بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Before we start, I want to remind you to pray for the whole of humanity during your Friday prayers, that Allah may keep every human being safe and sound and free from harm. جعل الله الكعبة البيت الحرام قياما للناس والشهر الحرام والهدي والقلائد ذلك لتعلموا أن الله يعلم ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وأن الله بكل شيء عليم. This is Al-Ma'idah chapter 5 verse 97 that I have just recited. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. And its English translation is, Allah has made Kabah, the sacred house, a means of support for people, and the sacred month and offerings and the victims with garlands. That is, that you may know that Allah knows whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth, and that Allah is knower of all things. Someone recently shared an article from an Urdu newspaper which said that basically the Holy Kabah and the pilgrimage and praying to it and so on has some kind of a physical impact. And they said that scientists, we don't know who these scientists are, they have confirmed the fact that if Muslims stop praying towards the Kaaba, then the earth will stop rotating. And that if you go into space, there's a light that you can observe that comes from the Holy Kaaba. There is no support for such things from the Holy Quran or the Hadith of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, etc. And in fact, to relay such news without any basis and authenticity in the name of supporting Islam is in fact un-Islamic itself. Because God says, if someone tells you something, don't spread it. First, investigate how true it is. And then tell it to others. But as I said, you know, what the Holy Quran tells us is that Allah created the Kaaba and Allah has decreed some months holy in the sense that no fighting or war is to take place during that time. I would suggest that this is the beginning of an attempt to create harmony between people. That at least there is one place and some time every year when no fighting, no disharmony is going to take place. If not all over the earth, then at least in that place. So that place becomes an example of how human beings can live together peaceably. But then there is also the point that there's also the point that if you have two warring factions and they stop fighting for some time, then the tempers are going to cool down. Maybe during those months, they can negotiate. They can come to some kind of an arrangement to have peace between them and stop fighting permanently. Why mention the Kaaba? And why denote these months as sacred, where fighting is prohibited? Just look at the world and what the world does. After the First World War, there was such carnage, and so many people died. And in fact, First World War was called the war that will end all wars because of the carnage and chemical weapons and things. And chemical weapons and things that were used by both sides to kill each other's young men. So what did they do? They said, let's create a body called the League of Nations. And they said that body will have a center in Geneva, in Switzerland. This was in 1920. So if there is any dispute between the countries who are members of this League of Nations, they will go to League of Nations. And they will sit down there and try and sort it out. What will they do? They will turn to League of Nations. It didn't work out. And there was even a bigger war with more killings and more devastating weapons being invented and being used to destroy the so-called enemy and their countries and their infrastructure and so on. So what did they do? They said, okay, let's have a United Nations. Now this is no longer League of Nations, this is United Nations. That all countries of the world, all peoples of the world unite together. And a center for United Nations was created in New York. And people decided that if there's a disagreement between two countries, then everyone will turn to United Nations. Does that mean that we worship United Nations because we turn to it for peace and harmony and so on? If we say, North Pole is in such and such place, and you turn, if you're trying to find out where you are and where you want to go, you turn to North Pole. Are we worshipping it? Does North Pole have some magical qualities? No, it doesn't. Does New York have any magical properties? No, it doesn't. Did Geneva have any magical properties? No. What it is the purpose for which these places are going to be used. But these were human attempts. This was Allah, God Himself decreed that this is a place of peace. And He decreed to Muslims that these are the months in which there should be absolute peace. And you should present to the world an example of how Islam can establish peace and harmony in the world. The UN, we have a sort of a restricted form of the same thing. Unfortunately, UN is controlled not by principles of peace and harmony, not by principles of justice and human rights and so on, but by who pays how much towards the expenses of the United Nations. And some countries have frankly said, okay, so you're taking a decision against us or one of our friends. So we're going to withdraw financial support from you. Let's see how you survive. This is no different to a rich man going to court, paying expensive barristers to delay his court, the case against him, or the rich man making up evidence so that he is not convicted, etc. Whereas the UN was supposed to be a tool for humanity, it has become a tool for the rich and powerful, which unfortunately is true of law in general. That law is for the rich and it's not for the poor man. Now, this ideal was espoused 1,400 years, 1,500 years ago. And God established the Kabah and provided Muslims with this opportunity to spiritually, 5 times a day, turn to it and establish a link with God. So not a second, not a moment goes by when Muslims are not praying to Allah, facing Kabah, same direction, for peace and harmony in the world and for human beings' problems to be resolved. The best thing would be for the leaders of Muslim countries to set aside some time and go to Hajj and have a meeting immediately after Hajj for one day to discuss the problems that Muslims as a community, not Moroccans and Algerians and Sudanese and Pakistanis and Malaysians and Indonesians, or Muslims in England or America or Australia are facing, but together as a community, what problems Muslims are facing and how to resolve them. But unfortunately, our leaders don't take advantage of this opportunity. Hajj is regarded as a ritual, not as something that is spiritually beneficial and that is also physically beneficial in furthering the cause of Islam and Muslims in the world. Generally, it is said, oh, well, I'll sin throughout my life and then go to Hajj and it will somehow wash me of my sins. Well, bad news, guys, is that it doesn't work that way. But Hajj is a many-faceted institution. It allows us to remember that a small, poor family, Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, Hazrat Ismail alayhi salam, and Hazrat Hajra, when they bowed and obeyed Allah's command without question, what happened to that family? Everyone remembers them. Jews remember them. Christians remember them. Muslims remember them. And extol and praise them. And Muslims 5 times a day pray to God to bless Hazrat Ibrahim and his true followers. But in addition to that, Hajj is an inspiration. Just think of this lady, I think it was in 1920s or 30s, Lady Zainab Buchanan, I think her name was, living in a castle on a hill in Scotland. She embraced Islam. She went to the Imam at Woking and she embraced Islam at the hand of that Lahore Ahmadi Muslim. And she went back. And she became a scrupulous Muslim. She prayed 5 times a day, she fasted, and then she went to Hajj. Can you imagine how she felt when she saw throng upon throng upon throng of Muslims? An isolated Muslim on her own, stuck in a castle in Scotland. How inspirational it must have been. It's not just Muslims from Muslim majority countries who go to Hajj. From all countries, the Muslims are in a minority, where Muslims are persecuted, where Muslims are having difficulty. Muslims of all colors and creeds. Muslims from countries which are poor and can't afford to feed their people. Muslims from countries with unlimited resources all gathered together, millions of them. And it makes you think, why do I need to be depressed? I'm not alone. Not only is Allah with me, but also I have all these brothers and sisters spread across the world who are with me. And that should inspire you, that feeling should inspire you to go out and do even greater things for the cause of Islam and for service of humanity. And it should make you think, if we gave up our sectarian differences and became united, what we could achieve. Sectarian differences, giving them up doesn't mean that if you disagree with someone, you give that up. In the UK, we have the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. They're both British, but they fundamentally disagree with each other about what the solution is to Britain's problems. They go to Parliament, they sit down to discuss these things, they disagree about them, and so on. And then the majority votes and agree on something that needs to be done. And then leave it in God's hands. Why can't Muslims do that? But we forget all of these things. And because we don't do anything for the cause of Islam, what do we try and do? We try and find magical things in Islamic rituals. We show, oh, look, Earth is rotating because Muslims are turning and praying towards Kabah, or going to Hajj and so on. Why is the sun rotating? Why is the sun rotating? Why is the moon rotating? Why is Mars rotating? Why is Uranus rotating? Why is Venus rotating? They're all rotating. Why? There's no Kabah on all of these stars and planets, and yet astronomy and physics tell us they're all rotating. But to satisfy our own egos, because working is difficult, it's hard. You have to, put effort into it. Isn't it much easier to satisfy our egos? What do? We assign some magical thing to Islamic religion. It's like, people who said, oh, Neil Armstrong, when he landed on the moon, he heard the azan. How? There's no air on the moon. He was in a sealed suit. Nothing could get in or out of that suit. How did he hear the azan? A friend of mine who passed away many years ago, was a solicitor in London. He wrote to Neil Armstrong. He said, I've heard this. And he said, it's a complete lie. After landing on the moon, I became a devout Christian. I'm not a Muslim. What did you gain by ascribing a lie to Neil Armstrong? Apart from denigrating Islam and bringing that into disrepute. If this is the sort of thing that Muslims have to stoop to try and argue that Islam is the right religion, is it really the right religion? And I end with the words of Hazrat Umar. He went to Mecca and he performed either the Hajj or the Umrah. And at the end, he went to the Black Stone and he took his stick and hit the Black Stone with it and said, I know you can't harm me and you can't benefit me. Every time I go do a circuit of the Kaaba, I kiss you because my Prophet did that. in my theory, is that the Holy Prophet probably did that just to keep a count of the number of times he had to go around. If you have a perfect cube and there's no starting and stopping point, how do you know how many times you've gone around? And he hit it again. And he hit it again. In public. Because he was trying to show that these things do not have supernatural and magical powers. What benefits us and what harms us are our own actions and our own deeds. If you don't want to propagate Islam, don't. But please don't bring it into disrepute by assigning to Islamic rituals things which are fairy tales, which are fictitious, and which are untrue. As I said in reply to this, the earth has been rotating since it was created. And the Kabah came much later. So how was it rotating before people started praying towards Kabah and going to Hajj? We should do practical things to serve Islam, and in our case, in the Lahore Ahmadiyya movement. And not just live in a dream world of mystical beings and things which are going to come down from heavens and put everything right. Unless we put effort into it, nothing will happen. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Qur'anil azim wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim innahu ta'ala jawadun kareemun malikun barrun kareem. Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم. عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. Today, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين إنا أعطيناك الكوثر لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر أبتر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين الله أكبر الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah. ربنا آتنا في Thank you for joining us for our Friday service. I hope you found it useful, and we'll meet again next Friday, inshallah. I hope with a different topic, and carry on from there. In the meantime, in your prayers, please remember the whole of humanity and pray to Allah to relieve those in difficulty of their problems and watch over them. Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, goodbye.